Hi, my name is Aalap.
Hi, I'm Aditi, and welcome to the Much Much Show.
We're the co-founders of Much Much Media, a neurodivergence-led content and insights company helping brands and nonprofits tell inclusive stories.
Our mission is to tell 1 million stories of disability and neurodivergence. We are an active community of neurodivergent individuals, disabled individuals, caregivers, and allies. We are active on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Today we have on our show Rahul Jindal of Google India. Rahul headed up the Employee Resource Group for Disability Alliance at Google. Rahul is a self-advocate, he's an ally, and of course our mentor. And we're so happy to have him here today. Hi Rahul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, folks. Hope you're doing well. Really grateful for what you're doing it with Much Much Media, Much Much Spectrum, and it's really heartwarming to see that creative directors like yourselves have taken on the important task of telling the story of this community and for this community. So thank you. Nice to meet you again.
Thank you so much, Rahul.
Thank you so much.
So Rahul, you've been associated with this discourse for a very long time. What does inclusion mean to you?
Well, thank you for asking that question. So inclusion is where nobody has to put on a mask or put on a show to go around living their lives, right? It can be in the neighborhood, in the society, or if they are working, then at the workplace. If they're in a school, then in that environment. So inclusion is where everybody can be just themselves and they have all the opportunities available to them which are available to anybody else, irrespective of any differences.
So you have experience leading the disability ERG at Google. So can you tell us what is exactly an ERG?
Yes, absolutely. So ERG stands for Employee Resource Group. This is a loosely held conglomeration of people who may themselves be related to the cause, and ERG can be for any cause. It could be mental health, it could be gender differences, it could be sexual orientation preferences, it could be anything along those lines, and that is the same thing that applies to disability as a difference amongst the human population and human population at the workplace. So Employee Resource Group is a loosely held group, like I was saying, of people who care about the topic. Now, they may care about the topic because they themselves identify with the difference, or they are an ally, or they are a caregiver, or they might simply be a researcher who's trying to learn more about that difference and maybe trying to build products and services related to that. So at Google, the supportive culture that the company is known for, one of the robust tenets of that supportive culture is this concept of ERGs. So we have ERGs for women, right? Because despite many attempts, women still tend to be the minority, even though we are an equal gender. So there is an ERG for women, there's an ERG for the LGBTQIA plus community. And similarly, there's an ERG for disability. It's called Disability Alliance. And I quite like that word, that the alliance actually describes what this ERG is about. So this is a group of people who care about disability and work together to learn more, share more, and increase the awareness inside the company and outside the company, and make the people who belong to this group feel belonged.
How do ERGs help start a dialogue about accommodations, about inclusion, about our different needs of your employees, or of caregivers who are in your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I often look at this multi-step kind of journey, right, which is awareness, acceptance, and advocacy. So how do ERGs start? I think they start by taking it on themselves to increase the awareness. Now, like I said, the ERG could have people from the community itself. So let's say people with some sort of difference or disability, or it could be people around them as a family member, as a caregiver, as a friend, or it could be an ally who is neither a caregiver nor a person directly exhibiting a difference or a disability, but somebody who just cares out of their compassion. So they start by creating a psychologically safe space, which again sounds like a big deal, but it is really just if people with some sort of responsibility or power at the workplace start to talk about it, I think that's the birth of an ERG, right? That signals to others that it is okay at this place. at this workplace, it is okay to talk about this. It is okay to show up as this. But even if there is nobody, let's say with a disability at the workplace, even if the leaders can start to talk about it, I think that will become the driving force for people to be attracted to that team or that company. So it really starts with raising the awareness, like I said. Of course, with mature ERG efforts, it can go to acceptance. Now, acceptance can take the form of hiring. Acceptance can take the form of equal opportunity in moving up the corporate ladder. It can take the form of spending some corporate resources, and so on and so forth. And then we move on to advocacy. Even though I'm laying these out as linear, of course, these are iterative also.
Right.
But advocacy means that the company actively takes an outward role also in terms of promoting that cause. That means maybe spending some of their CSR budgets, maybe in their creatives, having people from that community, right? In any of their marketing efforts, on their board, they can have people like that. They can support other for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. So there's no rocket science here, right? It just starts with that sincere intent, and then you build it up from there.
Right. You mentioned awareness. I think that's one of the key things in running a successful ERG, because knowledge, surprisingly, awareness still remains one of the biggest barriers in achieving true inclusion. Which then unfortunately might translate into a lack of intent. It might come across as there is no intent when actually there is no awareness, which is at the root cause of maybe a lot of problems. So how can bigger companies sort of address this for society at large, and also for smaller companies, in terms of how do you, what's the best way to put more knowledge out there, to build more awareness?
Yeah, it's a great question. We are very fortunate to be living in the era of the internet, right? Information and knowledge dissemination is no longer a problem. In fact, we might have too much of it. So I think it is really about if we don't have any native knowledge on the topic ourselves, we can always bring in folks. In fact, that's why I absolutely love what both of you, Aalap and Aditi, are doing with your media company and your media platforms and channels, is to bring people like you in, bring self-advocates in, bring parent advocates in, bring other advocates in. So I'd say that it is really about just opening up our minds and hearts to inviting the discourse in. It is not difficult to find. Neither are the people difficult to find, nor is the information difficult to find. So I just simply say that the effort needs to be made in terms of destigmatizing the word. This word itself, in fact, it's a quick anecdote I want to share, that even at a company like Google, which, it's in our mission statement, making the world's information universally accessible and useful. Even in the company where the accessible word is in the mission statement, we had quite a dialogue about that. Should this be called Disability Alliance? Can we not use some softer terms like special needs, special abilities, gifted, or I know in some other conversations outside work, I've heard special people, or God's people, or God's children, or so on and so forth. So there is such a large burden in even using the word disability.
Right.
I think we probably need to start there. So of course, we agreed that we will go with the taxonomy or the verbiage that the UN recommends, which is people with disabilities. So I think more discourse, more conversations like these are the simplest, easiest way to start. So I just would encourage corporations, large and small, leaders of all levels of seniority, to simply just be open-minded about this.
Better inclusion does equal more business, does equal higher profits. A lot of studies have shown that. But in India, the narrative is still different. So why do you think that is, first off?
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. So I think corporates, this is my personal opinion. There may be many other ways to look at it. I actually look at it as, why should corporates care, honestly, right? So I think two reasons. One is outside in, the other is inside out. Outside in, very simply, is let's say a theoretical corporation which has 0 people from the disability community. Even that company, whatever products or services it makes, there are 1.3 billion people in the world who experience some or the other form of permanent or temporary disability. That is a very large enough market, right? That segment has a lot of purchasing power. So every company, I think, can benefit from making sure that their products and services acquire some share of wallet of this large population, right? Now, to make high quality products and services for this population, how would you know whether you're building a high quality product or service? You will need to have people who experience that at least partially in your company, right? If not employees, then as consultants, as partners, as vendors, and so on and so forth. And when then that starts to happen, then you actually start to see that, hey, we'll be able to build better quality products and services if some of the folks were employed here. So I actually see that outside in is a very powerful force, but I think a lot of people don't really know. If you were to just generally conduct a social experiment and just go around the street or a corporate street, something, asking people, hey, what percentage of the world's population do you think experiences disability? I would not believe that most people know that it is close to 15%. So I think there is that awareness gap for sure. Because of the stigma, families have hidden their disabled for the longest time. Yeah. But now, of course, like I said, I'm very fortunate that we are living in the era of the internet when the dialogue is on, and then thanks to both of you for keeping that light on there. So that is the outside in. I think corporations have not realized the purchasing power of this community. So that's one. On the inside out, I think even if we keep disability on the side as a topic for a minute, in general, it is very well recognized that diverse perspectives lead to better quality decisions.
Correct.
Obviously, right? If everybody in the room is like me, we will look at the problem or the opportunity just from the same lens. So that's why I feel that bringing people who are different than us will lead to a different perspective. Now, of course, when we talk about gender diversity, I actually look at it that gender diversity is a powerful thing, because the way a man looks at something may not actually be the same as a woman, because the way the woman has grown or developed her perspectives will be different than the way a man has grown and developed his perspectives, right? So, and then we talk about, let's say, sexual orientation. Now, of course, a person who kept a big mask on their sexual reality, has experienced the world differently than somebody who is a straight cisgender in that sense, right? So, along the same lines, I think somebody who has experienced disability or experienced a difference with their physical functioning or their intellectual functioning or other things, by definition sees the world differently. Absolutely. Because by definition, they see the world differently, is, of course, they'll be able to see things in a problem or a challenge or a potential opportunity that nobody else will be able to look. So I would say that, while research, etc., only validates these things, if we start to look at it from first principles, that, hey, if you have a person in the boardroom or if you have a person in the team who has lived a different life than most of the others, they will for sure, by definition, see the things differently. So to your point on why isn't it there as much in India, I actually think that India does get a bit of a bad rep. Yes, it is true that it's not as much there, but I'm a big believer in India. I'm a big believer in the ability of India to leapfrog. And just yesterday, I was really amazed to see two commercials. One from this giant corporation called Apple, right? And of course, it's a very well-made commercial on people with disabilities. But then, secondly, a very well-made, much low budget short story from this Indian company called Harappa Education. It just came on the LinkedIn stream. And it's simply I think it would have cost them probably a few $1,000 to shoot that, where they actually took 4 physically able-bodied people and required them to do only one task each on a wheelchair. And you could see they were struggling. So I say that, let us default to optimism. Let us default to energizing people. Yes, it's not there in India, but hey, all of us are sitting in India. Right? We are not sitting in Denmark. We're not sitting in Sweden. We are doing this conversation. So India will become what Indians will make of it. And as responsible Indians, I think we have the opportunity to make this country leapfrog even on this dimension.
Taking off from the point of optimism that you mentioned, there's a lot of euphemisms that we use to talk about disabled people. People will say, as you mentioned, people will say specially abled, or they will say handy-capable or whatever. However, there is still always, which is obviously not the way it should be. But there's a very marked sort of deficit when it comes to incorporating a strengths-based outlook of neurodivergence or disability. That is also then by default the approach with which companies sort of go out there and hire us. So how can that narrative shift? In terms of maybe incorporating more of a strengths-based outlook of neurodivergence and disability.
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge in front of all of us, right? There's decades of bad practice, bad choice of words, just bad energy on the topic, which, ideally, actually, we should just listen to self-advocates, right, who have that as a lived experience and then just go by it. But because of lack of opportunities over the decades, there may not be as many self-advocates also. It warms my heart to know that now there are folks, including both of you, who are taking their precious lives and spending time on telling the story. So I think there's reason to be hopeful. But in terms of strengths-based, I feel good about corporates which have been able to bring in some autism at work or disability inclusion, etc. I think those are very helpful. They will continue to be helpful. But I actually feel much more hopeful about another trend. That trend is that the future of work is not what the past of work was. I actually feel that we are more and more moving towards a gig economy. We are moving more and more towards specialization. So I think both things need to happen. One is the advocacy of this strengths-based framework that, hey, hire people for their strengths, don't worry about it. I think that will be a slow process. Of course, role models will help. And I know SAP, other companies like EY, in some pockets, Accenture, Google, so many other companies are doing their bit. I think that is very valuable, but I actually feel more will come from self-advocates, right? When, for example, people see that, hey, here are these two people, Aalap and Aditi, who do fabulous work with telling stories, right? They actually see content, they actually see stories, they actually see camera angles that others are not able to see. I think proof of the pudding is in the eating, Aalap and Aditi, right? So when people see success coming from strengths, then people will go after it. When the strengths start to shine is when it will become a pull. So I think both are important. Push is important, pull is important. Push will be exhausting, pull will be easier, but I feel that iteration here will help. So I actually think this is nature's way of getting a lot more people in positions of power to care. So three things really, what make me hopeful about it. Four things. One is the rise of the self-advocates. Second is the push, right? All of the advocacy that we are doing. Some companies are starting to do programs. They're hopefully starting to see the benefits. More will come there. It'll be a bit slow, but that is valuable. The third is a pull, right? When people actually see how those strengths are put to work, right? Some sort of maybe artwork in any field of endeavor or science or law or something is created by people with differences, then they're like, wow, right? Then the pull is created. So that is that. And then, of course, because of the rise in incidence rate, it is becoming a more common topic. So all of these will become the flywheel, if you may, for change to happen. If you are talking like this 10 years from now, I can guarantee you, I feel so positive that so much more our dialogue would have evolved. And I think by that time, we won't be just celebrating one day of the year when we should care about the topic. I think it'll just become, it's one of those things, right, that maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, people may have worried that can a person wearing spectacles, can they do their job? And now it's no longer a topic, right? I'm sure 20 years ago in India, I've seen that India, when people were worried that can a woman who's just newly married, will she be a good employee? Because at some point or the other, she might decide to start a family. So what happens to the continuity of her role? But I won't say that it's no longer a topic, but it's much lesser a topic. So, we have reasons to be hopeful, folks, and I am hopeful.
Brilliant.
So I want to add something here. As you were talking about strengths-based approach, a lot of companies who are doing DEI from so many years, or who have just started this program in their companies, are really geared towards inclusion. They are trying their best. They are hiring different, so to say, professional self-advocates to understand the lived experiences and understand the needs of neurodivergent and disabled people. But somewhere along the lines, there are some needs or there are some accommodations uh, that a lot of companies try to understand but don't know how to accommodate that. And there like after a point of hiring, like after they hire this particular set of individuals, there comes a point when there's a communication gap, or there's a gap where the employee is feeling that okay, this particular need is not getting fulfilled, and I am not the most happiest person here working here. So how can that gap between the employees and between the company be bridged?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Accommodations is a thing, and I'd say that for a second again, let's take disability out, right? I mean, doesn't everyone need accommodations, right? So people may fall sick, so you have an accommodation called sick days, right? People may have some personal work, so you have personal vacation days that you can take. So I say that sometimes this topic feels a bit too onerous, and therefore some smaller companies, lesser resource companies may think, oh my God, we can't do it. But I think it's for us to also demystify the topic of accommodations, right? So somebody, and in a good way or bad, I mean, mental health in general is a much more prevalent topic now than it was even 10 years ago at the workplace. So I say that people with some sort of differences or disabilities, I think let us first bust that myth that the accommodations that they will need will be so profound that most companies are not able to satisfy that. I think we need to bust that myth, right? So maybe we need to we need to humanize and talk about what are the differences. Let's say somebody needs instruction to be given to them in writing upfront, right? I think that may help many neurodivergent folks function better than if instructions were given to them either vaguely or given to them piecemeal or given to them real time. But it's, I'm a big believer of this effect called the curb cut effect. That means when you actually solve anything, a process or a tool or a way to access something for a minority, it actually benefits the majority. So I think more stories need to be told, more dialogue needs to be had around the theme that, making sure a neurodivergent person or a physically disabled person is successful at the work requires not such profoundly different accommodations that your other employees will not need, right? So if a manager is giving clear written upfront instruction to everybody, I think everybody will benefit, not only the neurodivergent, the one among the 100, right? If there is sound is controlled in the workplace, it'll help everybody focus better, not only the neurodivergent who gets distracted quickly. So I think we need to demystify. We need to make it more commonplace.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Rahul, I want to hark back to the point where you said that where you mentioned caregiving. Essentially, now you are also a caregiver. So what are some common perceptions of disability and neurodivergence that you come to frequently encounter? Some misconceptions perhaps.
No, absolutely, and it's I realize that my association with disability is more profound than I would have realized a few years ago. So of course, my son's on the autism spectrum, so that's a responsibility. But then also my dad, when he was young, he actually had an accident which now in his older age impacts his walking. And of course, everybody's parents, including mine, are getting older. So you see other reduced functioning, etc. So I think the misconceptions are, one is that, people say sorry or I'm sorry for you or I'm sorry for your reality a lot more than it is palatable, I would say. I think support is welcome, understanding is welcome, but hey, why are you sorry for my life? I am not sorry for my life, right? I am trying to wholeheartedly embrace the life that I have been given, just like with anybody else. So I'm not sorry for your unfulfilled dreams. Why are you sorry for your imagination of my unfulfilled dreams? Surely, having a family member who's needs are slightly different, it becomes a bit of a challenge because of the social constructs are not necessarily supportive, and we are trying to change that through monetary and non-monetary ways. So I think be sorry that the society is not designed to be inclusive, but don't be sorry for me. Don't be sorry for my family. So that's one misconception. The other one is, of course, can this person then take the stress of a big job or a challenging assignment? Of course they can, right? I mean, if you support them, they can. If you support anybody, they can do much more than what they or you may imagine. So those are kinds of things. But having said all of this, I do want to say that most of the time, none of these words come from a place of malice. I think they may come from a place of ignorance, and that's why we should continue our efforts on awareness and advocacy. I don't think they come from a place of malice. I actually believe that most people have a good heart. I actually believe that most people want to help. They just don't know how to help. So I'd say that we'll have to find strength within the community so that we can be a little bit more open and accommodative. And for, in a let's say a cohort of 100 people in the society, maybe 90 are ignorant, maybe 5 care but don't use the right words, and maybe 3 care and use the right words, and 1 will support you through and through. I think we need that 1, and we need those 3, and we need those 5, so that we can form a community and educate the remaining 90.
Exactly.
So right, it is an effort, but I would say that for every person who feels sorry about you and your family and your situation, there is another person in a closed WhatsApp group somewhere who understands your situation, who is ready to give you their playbook for you to try, who's ready to listen without judging. So, hey, I mean, there are both sets of people, and that's what the world is about.
I just want to mention here the WhatsApp groups that you brought up. I mean, there are seriously so many of them, and there is so much information. There are so many experiences being put on all these WhatsApp groups. Yeah. But it's in these small groups that the real advocacy, that the real sort of experience sharing is actually happening.
Yeah, I think the Neurodiversity India Summit is a great platform for that, because mostly everyone we know, all of the self-advocates are going to speak.
Yeah, they're talking at the summit also. So yeah, they have. I'm sure they have some amazing experiences to add. Sure. So moving on. So Rahul, if there were maybe 3 things that we could do to better educate people about disability, and we keep coming back to education, of course, because we're finding that is one of the bigger challenges here, in terms of awareness, in terms of bringing about the changes that we'd like to see. So what are these 3 things that we could do to better educate people about disability and neurodivergence?
Yeah, I'd say that in driving a revolution, in driving a societal change, I'm going to share my POV on the 3 things. And I believe it equally applies to neurodiversity or disability, right? So the 3 things are: talk about it, ask about it, and fund it, right? So when I say talk about it, I mean do the advocacy, right? Talk about inclusion, talk about accessibility, like we are doing right now. And thanks to both of you, thanks to all the other participants in the Neurodiversity India Summit, thanks to the organizers. Hey, let's get some perspective. A few years ago, this forum didn't even exist. And now it is an annual affair. Change is coming, right? But the talking is helping, and more speakers from India itself are emerging. You folks did not participate in the Neurodiversity India Summit last year. Now, ace storytellers and filmmakers and self-advocates like you are a part of it, and even including people like me. So talking about it is helping. So let's talk about it. So that's one. Second is ask for it. So whatever forums we have, whether it is in the neighborhood, in the apartment complex where we live, in our families, in our workplaces, if our legislators will listen to us, the MLA, the MP, the councillor, let's ask them, right? Let's ask our public policy makers. Let's seek accountability. Of course, seeking accountability not only in this topic, in any topic, is a bit of a hit or a miss. There's a bit of a drop off in that funnel of seeking accountability. But just like we accept a drop off in the funnel of seeking accountability on other topics, why should we be discouraged about seeking accountability here? So I think if we seek, I think 1 out of that 10, 1 out of that 100 person in power will respond, and that will help. So that is my second point on ask about it. And third is, see, these efforts require resources. right? So funding organizations that we believe are doing good work is also important, and it doesn't have to be like very, very large amounts. I mean, I'm sure all of us do small amounts of contributions, whether it is through direct purchases or through really just direct monetary contribution or volunteer hours contribution or connecting person A with person B. Whatever way we can help, I think we should fund it, right? We should fund it through our good efforts. We should fund it through our own literally volunteer hours, through our money if we can, through canvassing others who have the money. But funding is important. And I think in India, there are very many good organizations led by self-advocates, led by sincere caregivers, led by sincere people who care about the cause. So they need the money, right? And every single penny, every single rupee, every single paisa matters. So please fund it. I mean, there is so many places where we spend and then we regret, why did I spend? And this is, of course, a cause where nobody will regret. So let's not shy away from the reality that building sustainability into any societal change requires resources, right? And if we have the resources, let's contribute through those resources. So yeah, to summarize, talk about it, ask about it, fund it.
Brilliant.
So, as a caregiver, talking about resources, as a caregiver, what kind of support system you find lacking both for your well-being and for your son's well-being in India?
No, absolutely. I think we've spoken a lot about awareness, right? And lack of awareness leads to lack of sympathy or empathy and support and compassion. So, and I don't want to just overemphasize just our situation. I mean, anybody in any situation, when they are lacking people around them who have empathy for their situation and therefore action driven by that empathy, find it a bit troubling. So sure, I mean, we've also gone through that journey over the last 6 years post our son's initial diagnosis in terms of, schools, in terms of, neighborhood facilities which may suit his and our needs. But I want to say that, India is a good enough place. The world is a good enough place where once you start to seek, and if you start to seek sincerely, you will find. So for every general WhatsApp group where the conversation feels like it doesn't relate to our reality, for every school parent-teacher meeting where the conversation or a discourse feels like that it doesn't relate to our reality, there is a WhatsApp group where 90% of what the conversation relates to our reality. May not be this fancy brand so-called inclusive school. There may be a small learning center, but where we feel belong. So I think what kind of difficulties have we faced? I think it is the lack of precedence as a theme that we face. But, as a practicing Buddhist family, we believe that, when you can't find light, you be the light, right? So, and we believe that it's okay. I mean, we might have more difficulties, but for every difficulty that we overcome, we should, as they say in Buddhism, that when you light the lantern for another, your path is also lit. All right. So, and I would say not only our family. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of families in India who are, whether or not they follow Buddhism directly, through their conduct, they are actually creating the light, creating the path for others. So I'd say that there are challenges in how to engage the child. We don't always find play dates. We don't always get invited to birthday parties. We don't always get invited to other do's, but it's okay, right? I mean, for every door that closes, 2 or 3 doors open, and those are probably the better doors that you should be walking. So I am very happy to see even social media now awakening to people with neurodiverse conditions and therefore the needs of those families. But yeah, it's not easy on day one, Aditi, to answer your question, but it becomes easy on day 5, right? And when it becomes easy on day 5, then we want to make sure that for many families who may be earlier in their journey, it is easy on day 1. Because there are people who are making it easy for us. So I think it is just about benefit and benefit others. Benefit from the efforts and discourse of others, and benefit with the effort and discourse of you, so others can do them.
So I think I'd like you, Rahul, now to just talk about the peach, plum, cherry, damson analogy that you gave to us. That is something that you talk about quite often, which I think explains diversity very beautifully.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a believer that when human beings don't have an answer, we should go to nature, right? So if you see flowers, right? So there is the flowers of plum, peach, cherry, and damson. All of them are flowers. All of them are produce of nature. All of them are plentiful, but all of them are not the same. Now, if one type of flower says that I want to be, one type of tree says that I want to be as tall as the other one, or I want to bloom in the same weather that the other one does, or I want to have the same shape and size of flower that the other one does, or I want to have the same shape and size of trees, the leaves that others do, is just not the right thing to seek, right? Each of them blooms in their own way. So similar, I think each human being will bloom in their own way. Each family will bloom in their own way. So when the vocabulary becomes too much, when the lack of inclusion becomes too much, I think we should just go back to nature. And I also have a warning for people, right? That diversity or neurodiversity is a natural phenomena. If people will not awaken to it, I think it is to their detriment as human beings, as businesses, as providers of products and services, right? So since nature created space for plum, peach, cherry, and damson, nature wants us to create space for all kinds of minds and all kinds of thought processes and all kinds of ways people process information. So if we are wise and if we are also smart business people, we will awaken to it and include.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Rahul. Thank you so much for joining us on this.
I hope there is some usable content there. I wish I had the ability to memorize lines, but I can't, so you'll have to edit.